Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump has once again pressured South Korea and other allies to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He said economies other than the U.S. get much more oil from the vital waterway, and also emphasized that the U.S. has provided security protection to its allies. But amid renewed calls, European countries rejected military involvement in the crucial oil choke point. Leaders of countries including the UK and Germany signaled clear reluctance, saying they will not be involved in the war. Amid escalating tensions in the Middle East, President Trump also requested postponing his upcoming trip to China, which was originally scheduled for later this month. We begin this morning with U.S. President Donald Trump's renewed calls for South Korea and other nations to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. He said economies other than the U.S. are more dependent on the vital waterway and urged them to be more enthusiastic. Our Kim Bo-kyung starts us off. U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday once again urged countries, including South Korea, to actively help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking to the reporters at the White House, Trump said the U.S. strongly encourages other nations whose economies depend on the strait to help secure the key oil shipping route.
We get less than 1% of our oil from the strait, and some countries get much more. Japan gets 95%, China gets 90%, many of the Europeans get quite a bit, South Korea gets 35%. So we want them to come and help us with the strait.
Though Trump did not single out any particular nation, he accused allies of showing low enthusiasm for the coalition and added that enthusiasm would matter to him.
Some are countries that we've helped for many, many years. We've protected them from horrible outside sources, and they weren't that enthusiastic. And the level of enthusiasm matters to me.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also stressed the importance of global cooperation to ensure security in the Strait of Hormuz, a move seen as laying the groundwork for an official request at the U.S. government level. This during Rubio's phone talks with his South Korean counterpart Cho Hyun on Monday. The talks were held at the request of the U.S., and Rubio, according to the Foreign Ministry, asked for support and interest to bring peace and stability to the region. Earlier, the Blue House had kept a cautious stance regarding this issue during Monday's briefing, saying it needs sufficient deliberation between Seoul and Washington. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News. But U.S. allies are pushing back against President Donald Trump's call for military support to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, as Iran's actions continue to disrupt vital global energy shipments. European leaders say the escalating Middle East conflict is not NATO's mission, exposing growing divisions with Washington as the war enters its third week. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Several key U.S. allies said Monday they have no immediate plans to send naval forces to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, pushing back against President Donald Trump's request for military support to keep the vital waterway open. Trump had called on partner nations to help police the strategic strait after Iran responded to joint U.S.-Israeli strikes with drones, missiles, and naval mines, effectively shutting down tanker traffic through the narrow channel. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most critical energy choke points, normally carrying about 1/5 of global oil shipments, as well as large volumes of liquefied natural gas. European leaders signaled clear reluctance to involve NATO in the escalating conflict. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz made it clear on Monday that Germany would not take part in the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran.
Like the United States and Israel, we want to see an end to Iran's nuclear and missile programs, but we will not take part in this war. We have said this from day one. That remains the position of the federal government.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also rejected suggestions that the military alliance could be used to secure shipping routes through this strait, reinforcing a broader European stance against expanding NATO's role in the crisis.
We will protect our people in the region. Second, while taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war. And third, we will keep working towards a swift resolution that brings security and stability back to the region.
The pushback comes as tensions grow between Washington and its European allies over how far the alliance should be drawn into the conflict, which has now entered its third week. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, international oil prices fell on Monday as U.S. President Donald Trump reiterated his willingness to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Brent crude futures for May delivery settled at $100.21 per barrel, down 2.84% from the previous session. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures for April delivery also declined, closing at $93.50 per barrel, falling 5.28%. The decline in oil prices comes after Brent crude prices rose to their highest close in 3 years and 7 months last Friday. It also comes amid reports that some tankers were passing through the Strait of Hormuz and follows President Trump's request for support in escorting oil tankers. So oil prices have been swinging sharply over the past 2 weeks, with huge and unusual rises and falls starting to feel like the new norm. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Song Soo-young from the College of Business and Economics at Chungang University. Professor Song, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, good morning to you.
So global oil prices fell overnight following reports that some tankers were passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Can we expect this trend to continue, or will we continue to see sharp swings in prices?
So far, the atmosphere around the Strait of Hormuz has been a little bit relaxed, and that's why the oil price, particularly the Western Texas Intermediate and Brent oil future price has been dropped. But behind this movement of the oil price, that reflects the oil dealers would like to sell as much as possible and as soon as possible, because they expect on April the International Energy Agencies is going to supply the stockpiles of the reserve energy to the world market. And also they expect to pump out more oils from the governments around the world has supplied oils. Therefore, clearly the oil price will go down in the upcoming April unless the war between U.S. and Iran has been elevated to another level, and the total shutdown of Hormuz and some kind of international war has broken out. Then the oil price go up again. But still, the problem is both sides of U.S. and Iran would not elevate the current situation of war situation. That is why that part is reflected partly in the upcoming, the recent decline of the oil price.
Right, and to tackle this rising oil prices, the Korean government has imposed a price cap on fuel last week, but it hasn't been able to significantly bring down prices. Why is this?
Actually, currently, the effect of the price cap actually is going to affect the supplier of the oil, not just the consumers, and particularly the suppliers of oil who has imported from the Middle East countries and through the Hormuz Strait has been affected very much. Therefore, that is reflected in the current sudden surge of the price. However, as the President Lee has pointed out, price gouging also played out very important role. The recent abrupt increase of the oil price at the gas station. So to reduce the bad effect on the consumers' welfare or about the oil at the gas station, government set up the price cap but that will take time to become effective. And also, the government would like to supply the emergency oil stockpiles to the economy. And on the other hand, what is important is the government would like to set up some supplementary budget to help the importers and also not only oil at the gas station, but also the naphtha and some production facilities who make some plastics and important outputs from the oils and naphthas and some refined oil. That is a matter of concern right now. So that we are going to see that very slow but gradual decline of the price over time.
I see. And the Korean government is also expected to unveil details of its supplementary budget as early as next week. And this is potentially worth around 15 trillion Korean won, which is over $10 billion US. And this is to support, people's livelihoods amid this conflict. How effective might direct government intervention be in taming oil prices?
Particularly the oil price crisis in Korean economy is more pronounced at some industry level because our industry rely on the much imports from the outside the company. And so our dependency on the oils and the crude oils and also refined naphthas from abroad is very critical. Therefore, so far, the government has a supplementary budget and they have offered some vouchers to the importers and the producers and the manufacturers who make use of the oils to produce some manufacturing goods and to be used for the export outside company. So oil price has played a very important role in a determination of the burden of the production cost for the manufacturing industry in Korea. So that is why the government would like to provide vouchers and help and the importers of the oils and energy-related commodities from abroad.
Right, and the South Korean currency has moved past the 1,500 Korean won level against the US dollar. Why has the Korean won fallen so sharply compared to other currencies such as the Japanese yen or the euro?
Actually, as I look back the past record and the data, so year on year, actually Japanese value has been depreciated 6.78% based upon the year on year. The previous year, the same month point of the Japanese yen values has been depreciated much higher, much stronger than us. So Korean won has been depreciated against the US dollars is just a year-on-year base is only 3.67%. Whereas in the meantime, year to date, from the January 1st of 2026 and the monthly depreciation of Korean won has been more pronounced recently. So this reflects our dependency on some energy source outside the company. Also, the same is true to Japan. So to that regard, the monthly depreciation of Japanese also recorded 3.9%. This is true to Korean won, Japanese yen, and Indian rupee. So some positive correlation between the year-on-year depreciation against some month-on-month depreciation but most of the other countries in Europe and countries has affected most recently because they have year-on-year basis. Actually, their currency value has been slightly appreciated, remained the same as it used to be. So to that regard, the current movement of the Korean exchange rate is not, I don't think, much of concern because this is a very transient and a very temporary phenomena right now.
I see. That's actually good to hear. All right, Professor Song, thank you so much for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and my pleasure.
U.S. President Donald Trump has requested to delay his upcoming trip to Beijing, initially scheduled for later this month. U.S. officials are denying speculation that the delay is tied to pressure on China over security in the Strait of Hormuz. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
US President Donald Trump says he has asked China to delay his planned visit to Beijing by about a month. Speaking at the Oval Office on Monday, Trump said he still wants to travel to China, but feels he needs to remain in the United States while the Middle East conflict continues. White House spokesperson Carolyn Leavitt said earlier in the day that the dates may be moved as Trump prioritizes overseeing the US military operation against Iran. The Beijing trip had been scheduled for March 31st to April 2nd for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping that had been expected to help stabilize the rocky relations between the world's two largest economies. This comes amid tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, as Iran has threatened to set fire on vessels transiting the vital waterway. Trump has urged several countries, including China, to help protect commercial shipping in the strait, but Beijing has not directly responded. Still, preparations for a potential Trump-Xi summit have continued. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng held 2 days of talks in Paris aimed at preparing possible agreements on rare earth supply chains and expanded Chinese purchases of US farm goods. Wrapping up the talks on Monday, Bessent said if the summit is delayed, it wouldn't be due to war politics, but logistics.
If the president's visit is postponed, it would have nothing to do with the Chinese making a commitment to the Straits of Hormuz. It would obviously be in their interest to do so, but a postponement would not be as a result of any ask from the president not being met. The postponement, if it happens, would be because the commander-in-chief of the United States military believes that he should stay in the United States while this war is being prosecuted.
Beijing said Monday that the two sides remain in contact regarding Trump's visit.
Heads of state diplomacy plays an irreplaceable role in providing strategic guidance for China-U.S. relations. China and the U.S. are in communication regarding President Trump's visit to China.
The spokesperson did not respond directly to questions about Washington's call for assistance in the strait. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The National Museum of Korea is launching a bold new initiative. Its calligraphy and painting gallery has officially reopened after renovations and will showcase a series of masterpieces each season. Our Chae Young tells us more.
The National Museum of Korea, which closed its doors last August for renovations, has officially reopened its calligraphy and painting gallery. A new exhibition offers significant narrative depth by tracing the history of Korean calligraphy through stone inscriptions spanning from the Three Kingdoms period to the Joseon dynasty. Additionally, the gallery has lowered the barrier to classical art by showcasing the iconic Sun, Moon, and Five Peaks, a piece that recently gained popularity through its appearance in the series K-pop Demon Hunters. The centerpiece of this renovation is the themed exhibition section. To commemorate the 350th anniversary of his birth, the gallery is currently highlighting the legendary artist Gyeomjae Jongseon. This exhibition brings together masterpieces previously seen only in textbooks, including the album of paintings of Kumgangsan Mountain made in the Shinmyo year, which marked the beginning of true view landscape painting, and his late career triumph Hagyeon Falls. This marks the inaugural showcase of the museum's new initiative to feature seasonal masterpieces within the calligraphy and painting gallery.
With seasonal rotations, we plan to highlight 2 or 3 must-see masterpieces under the title Masterpiece of the Season, including familiar works in school textbooks.
Works of calligraphy and painting are highly susceptible to damage if exposed to light for more than 3 months. So, the museum has traditionally rotated them on a regular basis. Now it provides a curated series that introduces different textbook masterpieces for every season.
It is a one-point special exhibition designed to bridge the 4 seasons, giving visitors a compelling reason to visit our museum at least 4 times a year.
As the newly transformed calligraphy and painting gallery is expected to drive a new wave of repeat visits, the upcoming global museum attendance statistics will provide a clear measure of the international standing of the National Museum of Korea. which reached a record-breaking 6.5 million visitors last year. 차윤경, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. A total blackout has paralyzed Cuba as the nation's crumbling electrical grid suffered a complete systematic failure. The Cuban Ministry of Energy and Mines on Monday confirmed a complete disconnection of the island's power grid, leaving 11 million people without power. It's the third major island-wide blackout in just 4 months. Cuba has blamed President Donald Trump's recent warning of tariffs on countries that supply oil to Cuba, which has effectively intensified a U.S. energy blockade against the island. President Trump on Monday even suggested the possibility of a friendly takeover, describing Cuba as a, quote, very weakened nation. As well as oil shortages, the Cuban government lacks the hard currency to repair its aging thermoelectrical power plants. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy returned to court in Paris on Monday to appeal his conviction for illegal campaign financing involving the Libyan government. Sarkozy is challenging a September ruling that found him guilty of forming what was described as a criminal association to secure funds from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. This landmark verdict marked the first time a former president of modern France received an actual prison sentence. Although the 71-year-old leader spent 20 days in prison last year, an appeals court ordered his release pending this new trial. 9 other co-defendants, including 3 former ministers, also face re-examination of evidence in hearings scheduled through June. Sarkozy has denied all wrongdoing and called the legal proceedings politically motivated. A federal judge in Boston has blocked the Trump administration from cutting down the U.S. childhood vaccine schedule. Judge Brian Murphy issued a temporary injunction on Monday against Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s order to end broad recommendations for several childhood vaccines. The decision pauses the administration's plan to stop universal shots for flu, hepatitis, and meningitis. Judge Murphy said that Kennedy likely violated federal law when he changed the entire vaccine advisory panel. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang predicts that soaring demand for AI processors will drive $1 trillion in sales by 2027. Huang made the prediction on Monday during his GTC 2026 keynote speech, where he also announced Nvidia's plans to introduce new semiconductors made with technology acquired from the startup Grok. He told attendees that the new Grok 3 LPU will integrate into the Vera Rubin supercomputer to handle AI responses with extreme speed. To meet this soaring demand, Samsung Electronics will manufacture these Grok-based chips for systems arriving in the second half of the year. Huang also confirmed strengthened partnerships with industry giants like IBM, Adobe, and Uber to broaden the reach of its AI infrastructure.
The air is still looking pretty dusty out there today. A fine dust emergency alert is in place for the capital area in parts of Chungcheong-Namdo province, and emergency dust reduction measures are being enforced. Incheon is also under an ultra-fine dust advisory, so please avoid spending time outdoors if you can and keep a mask handy. Meanwhile, a mild westerly breeze will send temperatures to the mid to upper teens, and Seoul will be getting up to 15 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gwangju will be topping out at 18 degrees this afternoon. Now looking ahead to Wednesday, rain will move into the picture. Showers will begin before dawn across the southern regions in Jeju. And along the southern coast in Jeju, the rain could be much heavier with 10 to 50 millimeters expected on the island, possibly through Thursday. But that rain should help to wash the dust in the air. And after the rain system moves out, we'll continue in this typical early spring pattern.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
해금은 두 줄로 된 한 악기인데 저도 처음에 시작하게 된 거는 그 두 줄에서 너무 다양한 소리가 나오는 게 너무 신기했고 일단 해금이 되게 사람의 목소리랑 좀 비슷하다고 많이들 하세요. 줄을 눌러서 이렇게 음을 계속 왔다 갔다 진동하는 그런 형태를 띠고 있다 보니까 애절하다라고 많이 말씀을 해주시는 것 같아요. 이 곡은 제가 좀 오래 좋아했던 친구에 대한 제 여러 감정을 담은 곡인데요. 슬펐던 마음 혹은 뭐 고마웠던 마음 이런 여러 가지 감정들을 한데 묶어서 마음이 담긴 곡이라고 할 수 있습니다. 현대적인 음악으로 이제 재구성하는 단계를 거칠 때 항상 중요하게 생각하는 거는 음악의 분위기를 해치지 않는 선에서는 뭔가 전통적인 주법들, 식임새 이런 전통의 냄새라고 할까요? 맛? 이런 걸 살릴 수 있는 요소들을 좀 집어넣으려고 하는 편이에요. 저는 요새 연주하면서도 스스로가 마음도 편하고 몸도 편안한 음악들을 좀 자주 들려드리고 싶다. 제가 음악으로 위로받았던 것처럼 제가 하는 음악들로 여러분들이 좀 위로받을 수 있는 순간이 있었으면 좋겠다. 그런 무대를 만들려고 노력해야겠다라는 생각을 했던 것 같습니다.
아리랑 라디오 아리랑 고개로 넘어간다.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Bringing news just for you. It's Tuesday, March 17th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Kyun.
Good morning. It's good to be back.
Good to have you, and also Niles with us. Good morning. Good morning, and both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So as we mark the second day of the work week, we're turning to a topic that's been getting a lot of attention among job seekers in Korea: academic background. So with competition for jobs remaining fierce, many are asking whether the name of the university on a resume still plays a decisive role in the hiring process. So in your opinion, Kyun, how much does your university matter when it comes to getting hired here in Korea?
I think it matters a lot, and it plays a big role, especially here in Korea, considering how much Koreans put importance on educational background from such an early age. In an article that I read recently, SK hynix and Samsung Electronics were the top two companies that young people wanted to work for. Now, many of the higher-ups and team leaders, I presume, would be from prestigious universities, the so-called Sky universities in Korea, and it will be a common feeling for them to want someone from the same university perhaps to work under them, having school ties as a source of connection and collectiveness, which is something that we see in Korea, one of the traits, having that sense of collectiveness, having the same kind of educational background from like what university you're from. Now, although it's not as common and evident to see a preference for having school ties nowadays, it still exists in the hiring process, especially in top companies. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't applied for Samsung and SK hynix yet.
Yeah, I think that is a reality in a lot of cases because there's a sense of wanting to belong in a group, and then one of the things is university, unfortunately. So what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, it does make your first impression if it's on your resume and you have a prestigious school name on top. I've been able to dodge that system a little bit because I had a different type of portfolio. Who knew this day would come when you can use social media as a form of resume as well, the number of followers that you have and things like that. And my resume was more experience-based, more work-based, and so I got jobs when I was still a student at university. So my university was not a big factor, the name value of it at least, and I would have been one of the people who would have liked this system, enjoyed it very much.
And that shows how experience and a strong portfolio can sometimes offset those first impressions tied to just academic background. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen.
The criteria used to evaluate job applicants have long been a subject of debate. One factor that continues to draw attention, especially in Korea, is the university someone graduated from. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at the recently proposed anti-academic background discrimination bill, whether similar forms of academic elitism exist overseas, and what impact this legislation could have going forward.
As we just saw in the video, academic background remains a sensitive topic in Korea's job market, and a newly proposed bill is now aiming to change how that information is used in the hiring process. So what exactly is a newly proposed anti-academic background discrimination bill?
It is a fairly long name for that bill, but under the current law, companies are not allowed to ask job applicants for information that is unrelated to their job ability to perform the job tasks. For example, employers cannot ask about an applicant's physical appearance, height, or weight. They're also prohibited from asking about a candidate's birthplace, marital status, or personal assets, along with the education, occupation, or wealth of the applicant's family members, as these are all considered irrelevant to job performance. Now, the core idea behind the proposed Anti-Academic Background Discrimination Act is to extend the list of irrelevant information further by classifying the applicant's academic background and what school they graduated from as unrelated information to job performance. So basically, they're just going to look at the applicant themselves without all the resumes, what where they graduated from or how great their academic backgrounds are.
Right. So the idea is to expand existing hiring regulations to include academic background as well. And the proposal could bring some major changes to the hiring process if it moves forward. So in practical terms, what would actually change for job seekers, Niall?
Just to summarize, it means that in the future, people will not be allowed to include their school or highest level of education in their resumes. If the company violates this rule, they can be charged up to 5 million Korean won. And the law would apply to all workplaces that employ 30 or more workers. So if it is enacted, it could include large corporations and public institutions, which are considered desirable jobs among the MZ generation. But the bill is still at the proposal stage, but it's already drawing a lot of interest from job seekers in Korea.
So if enacted, resumes without school names could become the norm for many companies. And naturally, the proposal has sparked a lot of debate among job seekers and employers alike. So how are people exactly reacting to the proposed bill?
So for people who actually support this bill, they argue that it could serve as a chance to break the long history of the Korea's academic elitism. They argue that academic elitism is not a result of one's attitude and personal academic skills, but rather due to one's family background and accessibility to private education that gives them the upper edge over the college admission system called 수능 in Korea. So in Korea, to get into a prestigious university, private education is almost essential, starting from a very young age, from elementary school, say. So it comes down to how much financial support parents can actually give to their children. Again, going back to the link to one's family's background. They also point out that graduating from a prestigious school does not necessarily mean someone will perform well at work. Instead, by focusing on specific skills and competencies are required for each role, companies could select candidates who are truly suited to the job, making the hiring process more efficient for the business side as well.
And that's like a fair argument because here in Korea, for a middle schooler, some of them go to 7 different private academies, which is a lot of money, obviously. So supporters see it as a chance to reduce long-standing academic elitism in hiring, but not everyone agrees with that perspective. So what are the main concerns of those who, on the other hand, oppose the bill, Niall?
Right. On the opposing side, some argue that the academic background reflects an individual's effort, so banning it from resumes would actually be a reverse discrimination against people with prestigious educational backgrounds. They say that from a company's perspective, however, educational background serves as a basic indicator of diligence and reliability, and successfully passing competitive entrance exams to attend a top university can demonstrate how well a person adapts to structured systems. Therefore, critics believe that removing academic background from evaluation criteria could make it harder for companies to select qualified candidates.
I mean, at the same time, I can understand how frustrating it is for someone who worked hard to get into their dream school and for that to not really work on their application.
Exactly.
So the debate really comes down to fairness versus practicality in hiring standards. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. We ran a poll on the IDN's YouTube channel asking, should you include your school and highest level of education on your resume? So here's what the results showed. A clear majority, 82% said yes, while 18% said no. So the results suggest that while concerns about academic background discrimination are growing, many people still believe education should remain part of the hiring process. And to gain a more in-depth perspective on this, we're going to speak with a supporter of the bill. And that conversation is coming up right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Haewon, an activist who has been advocating for fair hiring practices and measures to reduce academic background discrimination in Korea's job market. So hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So what led you to start advocating against academic background discrimination?
I started researching students at vocational high schools when I was in graduate school. Through the research, I began to realize how heavily the resources of Korean schools are concentrated on college entrance exam preparation and on students who are expected to go to top universities. That process really made me see how closely academic performance is tied to economic inequality and inequality in the labor market. A lot of people say that grades are simply the results of individual effort, but what I learned was that they are also deeply connected to family background and regional inequality. In South Korea, vocational high school often end up channeling students into low-quality jobs, and industrial accidents involving these young workers happen again and again in those workplaces. When I saw this reality, it felt profoundly unfair to me. That sense of injustice is what led me to start speaking out and advocating against academic background discrimination.
Hewan, I think you have a very strong point. My next question would be, what are the main problems with academic elitism?
One of the biggest problems with academic elitism in South Korea is that our entire competitive system is built around exam that can only measure a very small part of a person. But in reality, those test scores end up being used to judge the whole person. People start to think it's natural that someone's opportunities and the way they are treated can change depending on their test scores. When that kind of culture becomes normal, people also become less sensitive to a very basic principle of human rights that everyone deserves respect. That's also a serious issue to democracy. South Korea presents itself as a democratic country, but even positions that are supposed to represent citizens, like seats in the National Assembly, are overwhelmingly occupied by people from a small number of elite universities. That means the power to make decisions about the country is also unevenly distributed according to educational background. In that sense, I think academic elitism clearly contradicts the ideas of democracy.
Thank you so much for that. The last question for today is, what do you think about the concerns that this could disadvantage top university graduates who have worked really hard?
As I mentioned earlier, academic elitism goes against the principles of human rights. I believe that any privilege that exists in a society where human rights are undermined is ultimately an illusion. Of course, some people might feel that it's a disadvantage if they can no longer gain opportunities simply because of the name of the university they graduated from. But in my view, going to a prestigious university is already a form of advantage because it means you had access to a certain kind of education. I don't see why that diploma should automatically open up additional opportunities beyond that. People often say that if they were the case, no one would compete to get into top universities anymore. But honestly, I think that would actually be the right direction. When competition becomes the central value in education, we inevitably lose many of the things we need to learn in order to live together as a society. And in many ways, I think people in South Korea are already experiencing the consequences of their laws.
I mean, I can really tell that you've thought a lot and researched a lot about this topic. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We just spoke with an activist about what led her to advocate against academic background discrimination, the problems caused by academic elitism, and concerns that the bill could disadvantage graduates of top universities. But the question of academic prestige isn't unique to just Korea. So does academic elitism exist in other countries as well, Kyun?
It does. In Western countries such as the United States, academic hierarchy also exists. Similarly to Korea, Ivy League universities sit at the top of the prestige ladder, and competition to enter these elite schools is intense. However, each state has a well-established public university system, and many students begin their studies at community colleges, roughly comparable to junior colleges here in Korea, before transferring to more prestigious universities. Now, because these alternative routes are relatively accessible to most people and students, academic elitism tends to be less pronounced than in Korea. Europe shows a similar pattern. In the United Kingdom, universities such as Oxford and Cambridge that we all know sit at the top of the academic hierarchy, while in France, the prestigious Grand École, literally meaning great schools, distinguishes elite private universities from public ones. Now, distinctions between more prestigious and less prestigious institutions certainly do exist across the world. However, academic background is generally not treated as an absolute determinant of a person's opportunities when getting hired at a company.
Right, so while academic hierarchies do exist in the West, they may not look exactly the same as they do in Korea, and the situation can look quite different in other parts of Asia. So how does academic elitism look like in nearby East Asian countries?
Right. It looks very similar. East Asian countries like China and Japan also have very strong academic credentialism, similar to Korea. For example, in Japan, educational background is extremely important in a large company recruitment. And even for people who enter politics, their university background is frequently and discussed and scrutinized. China also shows a similar pattern. Just as Korea has the CSATs or 수능, they also have a decisive exam, and the college entrance exam is called the Gaokao. It has a huge impact on the student's future life. Many students struggle intensely to get into the top universities like Tsinghua University and Peking University.
So it looks like Korea is not alone in this process, especially within East Asia. So with these perspectives in mind, attention is now turning to what the proposed law could actually change. So what impact could this bill have going forward?
Now, although this bill has not been passed yet, the very fact that such discussions are taking place may suggest that many people in Korean society recognize the harmful effects of academic elitism. Going forward, many hope the debate will continue to expand so that academic background no longer serves as an absolute yardstick by which individuals are judged, but just as, I guess, extra points interviews can look at. And at the end of the day, I think companies can only tell how good a worker is once they actually work with them in the office. So no matter how awesome someone's resume look like on paper or how confident the interviewer may be in the interview, it really depends by actually working with that person. But on the other side, I think for some institutions, they need to really find like the top tier, I guess, people in society. For example, researchers, scientists, mathematicians, experts in certain fields. Because of these people, they actually come up with all these incredible new technologies, innovations, and like finding maybe vaccines that can help billions of people. So in certain areas, we do need like the top tier smart students and people in society, and to find those people, I guess we may need to look at people who graduated from prestigious universities. But in general, in a democratic society, I think everyone needs to have a fair chance of getting hired, regardless of their educational background.
I mean, you made a really good point earlier about how companies can only know for sure when they actually work with these applicants, but that's not the case, which is why I feel like looking at what the university that they graduate from is like the easiest way to go by. But yeah, I mean, it's important to look at their skill sets. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a great attempt and step forward, but if applicants are no longer allowed to list their educational background, job seekers may end up spending additional money to build similar credentials equal to this, such as overseas experience or language test scores. And while the negative effects of the academic credentialism should certainly be addressed in our society, people who spent years in their school years working diligently should not end up facing unfair disadvantages and perhaps getting a job in that field. So I think there's many other aspects that we need to add on top of this policy that they suggested.
Right, so as today's discussion shows, academic background remains a powerful factor in Korea's job market. So while some see it as a measure of effort and achievement, others argue it reinforces inequality. It's a debate that is likely to continue as society looks for a more balanced approach. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. With News Gen, we'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Q.
It was great being here.
To have me and also Niall.
No problem.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this reminded you that when it comes to hiring, a diploma may open the door, but it's still worth asking how wide those doors should be. We are
News Generation.